All right, welcome. Welcome to live stream on pitching fundamentals for founders. uh, Utkarsh is joining us from LA, Linda from San Jose, California, Tignesh Mountain View, Philippe from Palo Alto. There we go. Finally, we have somebody further away. We have, uh, is it Manal from Toronto? And New York City checks in. Excellent. Welcome to you all. I'm going to try to keep this to 30 minutes or less. And feel free to just type there into the chat box any questions that you have as we go along, or if there's stuff that you want to make sure that I cover during our 30 minutes. Just type it right there to the chat box, and I will get to everything that I can. So let's see. I guess I'll start by introducing myself. So I'm Brett Waters. I have been in Silicon Valley my entire life. I have been founder and CEO of 3 venture-funded software companies. Today I teach at Stanford University. I teach 2 classes in the Stanford Continuing Studies program. One is focused on the process of getting from a startup idea to product market fit. And then the other course is focused on getting from there to scale. Those are 2 very different processes. Uh-oh, we have video and audio problems. Anybody else having an issue? Vibha says that they're having some issues. No, works good. All right, so I guess it's a New York City thing. All right, I'm going to keep pushing forward. And I also recently wrote a book called The Launch Path, which is basically about one of my 2 Stanford courses. It's about the process of getting from a startup idea to a launched and funded venture. So long ago, David Ogilvy said that in the modern world of business, it is useless to be a creative, original thinker unless you can also sell what you create, right? And, it is still very true today that if you want to be a startup founder, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to be able to tell that crisp, clear, and compelling story about what you're working on and why it matters. So I always tell my students at Stanford that if you go into Warren Buffett's office in Omaha, Nebraska, you will see framed on his office wall not his diploma from his undergraduate degree at Wharton, not his diploma from his MBA from Columbia, but what you will see framed on his office wall is a certificate for a $150 public speaking course that he took from Dale Carnegie long ago. And the reason that that is on his office wall and not in either of his fancy diplomas are because Warren Buffett says that learning effective public speaking skills changed his professional life. And so this is kind of the theme of tonight's live stream, is that when we talk about pitch decks, when we talk about pitching, when we talk about presenting to investors, it really is mostly about public speaking skills and storytelling skills, right? So here's a pitch deck that is valued at $5, and here is a pitch deck that is valued at $5 million. And you can see where this is going. The difference is not the slides. The difference is in the storytelling skills of the presenter, right? And so that's kind of the first point here this evening, is that when we talk about pitching skills, we're really talking about storytelling skills. Humans are hardwired to be all about great stories. And so it's really not about building slides, right? It's about being able to tell a great story, tell a compelling story, tell a crisp and clear story about what you as a startup founder are working on and why it matters. So I love this tweet. I don't even know who Eric Baughn is, but I love this tweet of his where he said that he once thought that startup success was all about product, and then he thought startup success was all about sales. And now he realizes that startup success is all about storytelling. And so, if that's true, then the first tip I have for you is that, um, most people begin by building some slides, right? That's how most of us build a pitch deck or build a presentation, is we sit down and start building slides. And then we try to figure out what the story is, right? What is the narrative thread that connects these slides together? And so my first tip to you is think about the idea of, instead of sitting down and building slides, think about the idea of sitting down first and writing out the narrative. Because if you write out the narrative, if you get yourself a nice, crisp, clear, and compelling story, then building some slides to back it up should be a fairly straightforward process. Whereas doing it the way most people do it, and that's build a bunch of slides and then figure out what the story is, can sometimes be kind of a bass-ackwards way of doing it. And better yet, of course, can you tell a story without slides? So I once had this experience of going in to pitch a venture capitalist, and I started to open up my laptop with my amazing slides. And this VC said to me, he said, close up your goddamn laptop. He said, I'm so sick and tired of entrepreneurs coming in here and showing me their fancy slides. What I want to know is just, can you tell me what you're working on and why it matters in a way that makes me want to invest? And it's a really important point, right? That it really is not about the slides. And so a good way to do this is to write out the narrative, see whether you can get really good at telling the story. And then once you do that, then build some slides that can kind of back up the story as you're telling it. I think that often that is a more effective way of doing this process of developing a pitch deck. One of the things about public speaking in general is you want to practice but not memorize. So practice, practice, practice is important, but you don't want to sound like you're a robot just reciting something you've memorized, right? You want it to sound like you're enthusiastically telling a story, not just simply reciting something that you memorized. And it's a fine line sometimes between practicing and memorizing. Avoid jargon. So especially here in Silicon Valley, it's very easy for us to fall into jargon, right? Because there's always this year's jargon, right? And so right now it's about AI, it's about LLMs, it's about agentic AI. And so it's very easy for us to start falling into using a whole bunch of jargon. And of course, there's some people who think that it will somehow impress investors if you toss in a bunch of jargon. And in fact, it's the opposite. So I love this tweet from Paul Graham, the co-founder of Y Combinator. He says, when you describe what your startup does, describe it in the most matter-of-fact way possible. Professional investors hate having to decode marketing speak. Describing your startup in grandiose terms is the mark of a noob. So think about that. Think about how, not only does it not impress investors when you fill your pitch up with jargon, it actually will turn off most investors. The question is, can you describe the benefits of this thing? Can you describe what this thing does and the benefits to customers in a way that is simple and clear and matter of fact? So if you go back and you look at the original Uber pitch deck, you will see that they did not describe on the cover slide of their pitch deck, they did not describe Uber as a disruptive, mobile-optimized, GPS-enabled cloud platform that changes the entire personal mobility platform. In fact, the title slide on the original Uber pitch deck just simply says that it's a next-generation car service. And the same with the original Airbnb pitch deck, which you can find if you do a little search. It doesn't say a peer-to-peer accommodations marketplace platform with an AI engine and revolutionary new trust mechanism. It just says book rooms with locals rather than hotels. It's really important that as you begin to tell your story, that the audience immediately is able to get their head around what this is. And if you've described it with some convoluted bunch of jargon because you think that makes it sound more impressive, that makes it really hard for the people you're pitching to get their heads around what this is. So describe it in simple and clear terms. one of the most important things to communicate in a pitch is, why are you exactly the right entrepreneur for this venture? Remember that venture capitalists don't invest in slide decks. They invest in people, right? That's what an early stage startup investment is really in. The early stage startup investment is in an individual. It's in the founder or in the founding team. That's what I'm investing in. I'm not investing in a set of slides. I'm investing in this team, this founding team that I believe has a vision and has passion and can pull this thing off. And so get into your story as soon as possible, something about why you are exactly the right entrepreneur for this venture. I once had a student who told me about her, she did more than tell me, she showed me her whole pitch deck for her startup, and it was some technology to help people who were born deaf to be able to hear. And so she had this whole pitch deck about all the technology and how it was going to connect up to people's ears, and it was going to take people who were born without hearing, and it was going to give them the ability to hear and all of that. And at the end, I said to her, I said, it's pretty cool. I like this. Tell me where this idea came from. And she said, well, I was born with I was brought up with a brother who's deaf. And so I have just incredible deep passion that I've had all my life for bringing the gift of hearing to people who are born deaf. And I was like, whoa, you should have led with that. That's an important fact. And so again, why communicate in your pitch? Why are you exactly the right entrepreneur for this venture? What is it about your lived story? What is it about your professional experience? What is it about your beliefs that have led you to the moment of founding this new startup that you are incredibly committed to turning into a success? Because again, as an investor, I'm really just investing in whether or not I think that you have the tenacity and persistence to turn this thing into a success, right? That's really what I'm investing in. Because I know a lot of the stuff that's in your slide deck is probably going to turn out to be wrong. It always is. And so my investment really is in whether I think that you have what it takes to turn this thing into a success. And so what is it about your lived experience and your background and everything that makes you the right person to turn this venture into a big, huge success? Every time you pitch, be clear on what your desired outcome is, and almost always in a funding pitch kind of context. Your desired outcome is almost always to have another meeting, right? Because you're not going to sell the deal in one meeting. You're going to meet somebody who's going to say, tell me about your startup. You're going to tell them, and your desired outcome from that is for them to say, you know what, you should come to my office and have a meeting sometime. And your desired outcome from that first meeting is for them to invite you back to pitch to the whole investment committee, right? And your desired outcome from that meeting is you want them to be so interested that they ask you for some follow-up information. So again, just be clear on what your desired outcome is. And frequently that means kind of close with an ask around that, right? Know who you're pitching to, right? This is like a fundamentally important thing, especially in today's world where it's pretty easy to look people up on LinkedIn before the meeting. And so, I once witnessed a really embarrassing moment where this young guy pitching had no idea that one of the women venture capitalists in the room that he was pitching had a PhD in artificial intelligence. And he kept kind of saying things that sounded a little condescending, like she didn't really understand AI. There's just absolutely no excuse for that in the modern world. So always make sure that you are doing what any professional does, which is before the meeting, make sure you research who you're meeting with. It's fundamentally important. Yes, and as Wes says, mansplaining in the pitch is never a good idea. Don't let the slides distract from your story, right? You want your audience focused on you and the great story you're telling, not distracted by complicated slides that they're trying to figure out while you're telling your story. So don't ever do this, right? Don't ever do this. And please don't ever do this. So keep your slides simple. Make sure that because you want the audience focused on you and the great story you're telling, not trying to figure out what the hell is on the slide that you're showing them. Slow down. So, all of us, we get nervous and we start rushing, right? It's true for all of us. And as soon as you start rushing, you lose your audience. And so make sure that you don't rush. Make sure you slow yourself down a little bit. And here is one of the most important things ever about public speaking. Learn the power of the pause. As soon as you pause, you have the attention of the entire room, right? And so don't let yourself suddenly, start rushing and rushing and rushing because you're nervous. You're going to lose the audience. Instead, slow yourself down and relax, and learn that if you have a really important point you want to make, pause, because that gets the attention of the room. Use cases are always helpful, right? Again, you want to make sure in a pitch meeting, you want to make sure that who you're pitching to is able to quickly and easily get their head around what this is that you're talking about. And so use cases are always helpful. So, I've got the example here of, maybe in your pitch you say, so, let's say a farmer is looking for seasonal workers within a 30-kilometer radius, let's say. That's a use case that everybody, whether you're a farmer or not, you can get your head around this idea that farmers suddenly need to look for seasonal workers who are nearby. With our platform, that farmer can contact, screen, and hire them easily, right? Again, nice, simple use case. I'm not using any jargon. I'm just explaining it in a nice, clear, and simple terms. Remember that benefits are always more important than features. And so don't say, our fertilizer is a proprietary blend of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, plus micronutrients in pelletized form. Those are features, right? The benefit is our fertilizer gives farmers 3 times the crop yield with reduced labor cost. Boom. So make sure you focus on benefits to your product, not features. So those are my 10 kind of tips that I wanted to present to you this evening. So remember, the pitching skills really means storytelling skills. Practice, don't memorize. Avoid jargon. Make sure you communicate why are you exactly the right entrepreneur for this venture. Be clear in your desired outcome. Know your audience. Do your research beforehand. Before you go to the meeting, make sure you know who you're talking to and what their background is. Don't do complicated slides that distract from your story. Slow down. Learn the power of the pause. Use cases are always helpful in terms of helping your audience get their head around what it is that we're proposing. Remember that benefits are always more important than features. Customers don't buy features, customers buy benefits, right? And an investor wants you to get customers. And so make sure that you demonstrate to the investor that you understand that and that you are focused on the benefits to customers that your product or service is going to deliver. And I will add 3 things that are so obvious, I shouldn't even have to say them, but I'm going to say them anyway. Don't ever read your slides to the audience. It's like the worst thing you can do, right? Because first of all, as soon as you start reading your slides to the audience, you're taking your eyes off of the audience. You want to keep your eye contact on the people you're talking to, right? Not turn around reading your slides. And secondly, I can read your slide a whole lot faster than you can read it to me. And so, I can go ahead and scan the information on your slide while you continue telling me your story. So do not read this slide to your audience and then pause, advance to the next slide, read that slide to the audience and then pause, advance to the next slide. Nobody wants to sit through that kind of presentation, right? You're telling a story. The slides are going by as you're telling the story, and you should not be turning around and reading your slides to the audience. Always run short. If you've been allocated 20 minutes, come in at 18. If you've been allocated 10, come in at 9, right? That, everybody complains about presentations that go on too long. Nobody has ever complained that a presentation was too short. So whatever time you've been allocated, make sure you come in short. And by the way, on the same topic, if if I had, let's say I had a 30-minute meeting booked with a potential investor, I don't want to go in with 30 minutes worth of slides. Nobody wants to sit through 30 minutes of slides. I want to go in with maybe a 3 or 4 or 5 minute overview presentation, and then say, now I'd be happy to dive deeper into whatever part of this you'd like to dive deeper into, right? So do not fill up whatever your time slot is. Do not fill it up with time showing slides. And of course, practice, practice, practice. I would say that every time I've ever given a presentation, I've always wished that I'd practiced just one more time. Okay, so I'm going to pause for a second there. And Wes asked a question about outcomes with angels. I think it's exactly the same. I mean, again, you're not going to sell the deal in one meeting. You're not going to sell the deal by sending them a slide deck and saying, okay, here's my slide deck. Can you send me my money now? So I think, Wes, it's exactly the same with angels as it is with VCs, which is that for the most part, the desired outcome is an opportunity to have a follow-up meeting. And yes, Utkar says your slides are not your notes. Yes, that is exactly right. Excellent. Okay, so I think I've got most of the questions. So what's the actual content that should be in a pitch deck? So here are some of the things that I think may go into a typical pitch deck, right? I already mentioned the why are you exactly the right entrepreneur for this venture? What problem are you solving? What is your secret sauce? Secret sauce means, what do you have that would be difficult for competitors to copy, right? What is unique and differentiated about the way in which your startup solves the problem being solved? How will it make money? All right, I've sat through plenty of presentations where at the end I'm like, okay, but I still don't understand how this thing makes money. So especially in an investor context, it's pretty important to get the money-making part in there somewhere. And maybe it's just simply it's a subscription-based app, right? That's fine. Or maybe this app is, we're planning to use the freemium model with this app. So that's fine. It's just, you got to mention something about how this thing makes money. What does the current competitive landscape look like, and how do we fit in to that competitive landscape? It's not about trying to claim that you're better than any of the competitors, but it is about demonstrating that you have done your research, you understand the landscape of competitors and alternatives that you're going to be operating within, and that you have an idea of how you intend to be positioned within that landscape, right? How big is the opportunity? So market size, right? Again, this is just kind of a hint to the fact that this is a pretty big market, right? And you can frame that in terms of total available market. You can frame it in terms of, how many car dealerships are there in the country, but something about some notion about the size of the opportunity. Customer acquisition. Those of you who have been in one of my Stanford classes know that I pontificate a lot about how every venture distills down to just one equation, which is customer acquisition cost against lifetime value of a customer. How much does it cost us to get a customer? And then once we have a customer, how much can we make from a customer? And getting that wrong is the leading cause of startup death. And so getting into your pitch somewhere that you understand this and that you spend some time thinking about how you're going to efficiently acquire customers is a recommended thing. And lastly, what are your initial capital needs and what milestone will that get you to? So I hate it when I see a pitch deck that says, we're raising $500,000 and that'll give us an 18-month runway. Because that's like saying, I'm looking for somebody to pay my expenses for 18 months while I figure this out. That's not a compelling investment opportunity. So don't tell me the amount of runway this amount of capital gets you to. Instead, tell me the milestone that it gets you to. We're raising an initial round of $500,000, and we believe that on that round, we can get to a finished deployed product and 5,000 paying users. Right? So tell me what milestone this money gets you to, because that sounds like an investment opportunity, right? I'm investing in creating something of value. Paying your PG&E bill for the next 18 months is not an investment opportunity. And there on the bottom, I have the fact that, this is not a definitive list. Every venture is different, but this is just kind of some of the things that might go into a typical pitch deck. I'm going to send you all of this, by the way, so don't worry about trying to memorize these slides or take screen grabs, because I will send you all of this via email either later tonight or in the morning. And remember that your fundraising process, it actually isn't creating a pitch deck. It really is about creating a great story that you can tell in various lengths. So in other words, the reality of how this works in real life is you're going to run into somebody in a bar and they're going to say, what are you working on? And you're going to give them a one-sentence answer to that hopefully makes them say, oh, you know what? I should introduce you to my friend Bob. He invests in that area, right? And then you have a call with Bob and you give him your 60-second version. And Bob says, it's interesting. Why don't you come in my office sometime and do a formal pitch? And then you go in with the 3-minute pitch and the further discussion. And then they say, can you come back and meet with my partners? And then you can come back and do the 1-hour version, right? And hopefully eventually you get to the meeting where you close the deal. And so you're not really creating a pitch deck as part of a fundraising process. You're really creating a crisp, clear, and compelling story that you can tell in various lengths, like one of these Russian nesting dolls, right? And that's what you're creating. And a pitch deck might be kind of one of the deliverables along this broader task of creating a great story that you can tell in different lengths. And I will send you this, which is just kind of an example of a startup with a 1-sentence pitch, a 3-sentence pitch, a 60-second pitch, and a 3-minute pitch deck. So kind of this idea of nesting dolls, right? So the key takeaway, look at this, for 27 minutes, I'm on time. The key takeaway really is just simply that humans love great stories. And so when we're talking about pitching skills, we're really talking about storytelling skills. Humans have been telling stories for thousands of years, millions of years, right? It's built into our genes that humans are just all about storytelling. Our whole human existence is about sharing stories and about enjoying the stories. We've been doing it around campfires for thousands of years. Our entire judicial system is built around the idea that one person tells their story, the other person tells their story, and the judge and jury decides whose story they like better. That's our judicial system. And so storytelling is baked into our genes. And so it's really not about creating a pitch deck per se. It's about developing and refining your storytelling skills. Every entrepreneur has to have the ability to tell a crisp, clear, and compelling story about what she's working on and why it matters. So relax, enjoy, be a great storyteller. As I said, I'm going to send you a follow-up email with some example pitch decks, some additional resources. You can find me. I am just simply Brett Waters on all the socials, and I'm brettwaters@gmail.com, and so I'm very easy to find. I promised under 30 minutes. It's now 29 minutes and 24 seconds. Thanks, you guys. Have a great evening. See ya.